All right, here we are. Here we are. All right, we are here with Lila Sales and Bridget Farr. You guys, please go ahead and introduce yourselves. We're so excited that you're here. So.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Lila Sales. I am a author and an editor. As an author, I have published 8 middle grade and young adult novels with Abrams, Chronicles, Macmillan, and Schuster. As an editor, I've been working in the industry for oh my gosh, almost 20 years now. I was an acquiring editor at Viking Children's Books for a long time, which is part of Penguin Random House. And I acquired and edited board books, picture books through YA, fiction and nonfiction. I'm now editorial director for a small Jewish picture books imprint at Lerner, which is called Carben. And then I also do some editorial consulting, in my spare time.
Wow.
And I live in Austin.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Farr. In my day job, I'm a principal of an elementary school in Austin ISD.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was a teacher and an assistant principal. That's how I know JC, and then now a principal. And then I have 3 books published. 2 of them are here. 2 middle grade with Little Brown, and then my young adult, The Truth About Everything's with a much smaller publisher out of Minnesota called Flux.
Wait, Flux is owned by, aren't they also owned by?
They're owned by North Star, which
Oh,
maybe also owned by Werner. I don't know for sure, but that's their parent company. Yeah, I'm excited to be here with you all today and talk about books. One of my favorite things, as both a teacher and as a writer. So, yes.
God, how do you have time to write a book?
It's a great question. Mostly in small spurts and in the evenings and a little bit on the weekends. I'm just a better writer now, years in, which I'm guessing you probably noticed too. Like over time, the more you do writing, the better you get at it. So I just write better first drafts than I used to. So I don't need as much time because generally I can write something higher quality off the start than I could before. Yeah. Yeah. For me as well, right?
Right. I don't know if you guys would like to read any of your books or talk at all about like the kinds of books that you write to give people kind of a sense of your work. What would you like to do? Would you like to read any, or do you want to just kind of chat about like what kinds of?
I can read a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
You have
I have several of your books here.
Would you grab that one there? Yeah, thanks. This is my newest book. It's called The Museum of Lost and Found. So it's the one I can.
It's got a great cover.
Thanks. Yeah, they did a really good. Okay. All right, I'll just read from the beginning and stop soon. Then I don't need to give you any background. All right, The Museum of Lost and Found. Chapter 1. Vanessa couldn't say for sure which happened first, finding the abandoned museum or losing Bailey. Maybe this was because discovering the museum happened all at once. She woke up in the morning and didn't know it existed, and by the time she went to sleep that night, she did. Losing Bailey was different. That happened over the course of days, weeks, months, so slowly that Vanessa didn't even understand what was happening till one day she looked around for Bailey and found that she was gone. Well, that wasn't quite right. Bailey was still there, still a 6th grader at Edgewood Falls Middle School, just like Vanessa, still in Mr. Howard's homeroom, just like Vanessa, still on the school bus number 12 every morning and afternoon. Vanessa took school bus number 5, but that wasn't such a huge difference. Bailey was everywhere except that she wasn't in Vanessa's life anymore, and Vanessa didn't know why. There was one day when Bailey wasn't able to save a seat for Vanessa at their table in the cafeteria, and another day when Vanessa messaged her 5 times in a row, telling her a hilarious story about her older brother Sterling. And while Bailey did ultimately message back, it took her 6 hours, and all she said was ha. Not even ha, not even an emoji. One day, Vanessa asked Bailey what they were doing over the weekend, and Bailey replied that she was actually going to be out of town visiting her mean grandmother in Florida, which was fine, except that if Vanessa hadn't asked, would Bailey ever have even told her? These were all obviously small things, tiny acts of negligence, hard to prove that they were even done on purpose. They made Vanessa feel bad, and then they made her feel crazy for feeling bad because nothing really bad had actually happened. If you and Bailey are having a fight, Sterling said, you should just talk about it. You 2 have been friends forever. I'm sure you can work it out. But Sterling was very stupid. Bailey hadn't been her friend forever, just since second grade, and they weren't fighting. They had fought plenty of times before, like when Bailey caught Vanessa cheating at Monopoly, only it wasn't really cheating, it was just being strategic. Or that one time when Bailey wouldn't stop using a fake British accent, no matter how much it got on Vanessa's nerves. Fights were fine. This wasn't a fight. Sterling didn't understand anything. Vanessa told him as much, and their mom said, "Don't call your brother stupid." And Vanessa said, "What about freedom of speech?" And then their mother sat them both down for a half-hour lecture on what freedom of speech actually meant. She even brought out worksheets. It was all very boring. And Sterling said this was Vanessa's fault because Vanessa was the one who had abused her freedom of speech. And Vanessa said that it was actually Sterling's fault because he was the one who'd been so stupid and wrong about this whole situation or non-situation with Bailey. And then their mother abandoned the educational approach and told them both just to go to their rooms and cool off. You see, that was a fight. That was normal.
That was great. Very nice.
Had an emotional component. She's her friend and her are having problems. And then you also had kind of a little like mystery about this lost museum that she found. So
Yeah.
I think that was fabulous.
Thanks, because the museum's like the fun hook of the book, right? Like it's, if I said this is a book about a friendship breakup, you'd be like, okay, well, those are interesting, but there are a lot of books about friendship breakups, right? So the setting for the book, the sort of premise, even the way I explained it to kids, I say there's a friendship breakup, but I also say the main character finds this abandoned museum in her town. And that's so you have to get to that right in the first paragraph, because like that's the fun, unique part.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Layla, would you hold the book up again close to the computer so we can see the cover? Great.
museum
Thank you
lost-
very much. Yeah. Got it.
What
Thank
fits the kids initially? Is it the relationship angle or is it the lost museum?
I think the Lost Museum is the fun part, but the bit that tends to stick with them is probably more the friendship part. Though they like the museum
Yeah.
too. Like I'll hear from kids who have read it and then they make their own museums, which is
That's good. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like they're relating to the character and maybe something that they've been through, but also there's like an escapist kind of element too. It's like this is totally, and this part is totally different from your life and it's kind of fun.
right, exactly. There's something like aspirational
Mhm.
about it. Like you probably don't have a space that's so separate from the adult world
Mhm.
as the museum that they find is. And that's the aspirational part.
Mhm.
It's like a place where the grown-ups aren't in charge, the kids are in charge.
Mhm. Yeah. Terrific. Do you want to read a
Sure.
little bit of yours
Yeah.
as well? And-
I've actually not read the beginning of this out loud before, so.
Oh, really?
Great. Well, for all of you, I usually pick something different.
And
and I
what's
was
the
like,
name of
"No,
this
I
one?"
should." The section is titled Before.
The truth about everything.
Truth about everything.
And Bridget, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Got it. Yes, thank you.
Uh, Mom told me a story once about a man who built an enormous boat. And because he spoke another language, he called it an ark, but really it was just a boat. Apparently, God was so mad that he decided to make it rain and rain until the whole world was covered in water. Mom didn't know why, really, but she said probably murder. God's anger would send a flood to swell up over every piece of land, water and rain to wipe it all away. But God loved one man so much, he told him to prepare for the flood. The man was to build a boat, the ark, to save his family, but not just that. He had to take all of the animals in the whole world, except fish because of the water, and put them in the ark, as many as he could fit. When the man started building this huge boat, bigger than anyone had ever imagined, people started to make fun of him. What are you going to do with such a big boat? They laughed, patting their murderous bellies and scratching their murderous chins. There's no water near here. We live in a desert. They didn't know the rain was coming. Just like all the people around here didn't know the danger. Still don't. Like the people in the story, they look up and see bright blue skies. They weren't ready for Y2K and they weren't ready for the Great Recession. Now they still aren't prepared for earthquakes, asteroids, nuclear attacks, or the government takeover. They live like they can't see the clouds above. But we do. Dad says religion is the opioid of the masses, but we aren't that different from the man with the ark. Like him, we prepare. Mom and I can and store apples and choke cherries and even some peaches Dad buys in August from the Elks Lodge in town. We stew tomatoes and boil all the fresh corn, mixing it with salt and butter before sealing it up tight. I hardly get to taste the fresh bits of summer. Dad and I hunt year-round, carefully sneaking onto nearby land to bag the bucks we watch all season. He doesn't care about tags or fish and wildlife. They're all government anyway. Each time Dad comes back from a trucking job, he brings more supplies to store in the cellar. Kerosene, bandages, hunting knives, 2 used rifles, a scratched up pistol, and a radio you power just by turning the crank. Last winter, Dad took down some of his books and lined them up in alphabetical order. He bought extra batteries for the flashlight. Instead of cramming the ark with lions and spiders, we fill up the cellar. Grandma Betty thinks we're crazy. Your dad should be worrying about feeding his family, not preparing for the apocalypse, she says. But Dad's friends on the internet believe him. They're building their own life-saving arks in their basements. I believe Dad too, most times. After his flood, the man in the story got a new world. He parked the ark on a mountainside and let the animals out, back to find their homes in the prairie or far-off jungle, back to grazing and hunting and swatting the flies away, because remember, he brought those too. The man got a dove and a rainbow as a reward for his preparation. Dad got a cellar full of canned choke cherries and a couple of used rifles. We're still waiting for the rain.
That's very good. Very good. Great. Very good.
So definitely very different in tone from my first books. My middle grade are realistic. So like I said, I spent a lot of time in schools, so they're set in schools. The first is the girl who runs her own foster care consulting agency for other kids in foster care, and runs a business selling Sharpies and hot Cheetos for information she gathers from other kids based on their placements. And then my second, which isn't here, it's called Margie Kelly Breaks the Dress Code, about a girl who runs a dress code protest at her school and learns that's a lot harder to speak for others if you don't learn a little bit about the world first. And then this one, like I said, is significantly darker than the others, but still pretty accessible young adult. I think it doesn't have a lot of young adult right now has kind of older themes, but the narrator feels young, partially from the naivete. So I think it's a little accessible. And because she's not gone to school, I also wanted to write it with language that was slightly simpler when in spoken dialogue, but still had some of the poetry that isn't always available in text written for kids who need a slightly easier lexile level.
Do y'all feel conversant in the differences between middle grade and young adult or YA? Is
I'd
that,
like you to specify what the age
Yeah.
ranges are.
yeah.
Or
So, so middle grade typically refers to books for 8 to 12-year-olds, so upper elementary and sort of lower middle school. And usually the main characters, of those books are going to be that age group or slightly aged up, because the idea being kids like to read like up a little aspirationally. So the main characters of those books are generally maybe 11, 12, 13, something like that. And then YA or young adult is intended for readers 12 and up, and gets into much more mature themes. So a YA novel can have a lot more romance in it. It can have swearing in it. It can, it can be more PG-13 rated.
Can I ask you a little bit about like how you got into writing specifically for middle grade and for YA instead of for adults, and kind of capturing that voice of a young character, like what your thoughts are about that?
Sure, I can go first. I actually wrote for adults first. So I have a couple novels on my computer that no one has read. And I was writing an adult project when I got the idea for Kavi Sharma and Front Door Face. The tricky part was my agent eventually was like, well, are you reading a lot of middle grade? And I was like, no, because I'm with them all of the time, right? So like when I read for fun, I don't read middle grade. I'll read young adults, a little different, but when you're around children all day, like the escapism is not reading more about children.
Right.
But they were in my life, right? They were in my head all the time. And for that particular book, I had several kids who were in foster care at the time. And a lot of the books about foster care is about the tragedy of it. So like a child missing their parent or dealing with the kind of immediate trauma. And a lot of the kids I was working with did not want to talk about it, right? Let alone, like if I offered that book, it was going to be rejected. And so I wanted a character where their experience in foster care, they kind of moved through the harder part and were in a position to help others. And so got to be a hero. And not that it doesn't come up, because it does, but it wasn't maybe the first piece of it. But it's interesting, I think, talking about how kids talk and how publishers think that children talk, right? And how quickly like language changes over time. So like you have to try to write a not dated book because there's so much slang that happens, especially in middle school, right?
Right.
but you don't want a book that people pick up and are like, well, this was written in 2025. So how do you get that sense of youthfulness, when also trying to make something somewhat timeless?
Right. Yeah.
And then for young adult, I didn't know what this book would be, which was why it was a little confusing for my agent when I sent it to her. She was like, is it middle grade or is it young adult? Because it seems like it's young adult, but you told me it was going to be middle grade. And so, again, part of it was thinking about who's the narrator, what are they experiencing? It's kind of in this gray area. There is some romance, but not at the level you would see. You would see in some. Mostly was thematically that felt older for the book.
Right.
And did you find, like, did you get feedback on that when you went out on submission with it? Did some people feel like it's too in between categories?
Yeah, definitely. So interestingly, the biggest feedback I got for this book, because again, like my first book's like sold to a bigger publisher, it felt like, okay, things were going really well. And this book was not selling.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One is because some editors wanted it to be like an action novel a little bit, where like January 6th had just happened, and so people were like, she should like go to the Capitol and like pull him from the walls. And I was like, that is not the book that I wrote. And another piece was people thought that students who are interested in conspiracy theories don't read fiction. And it was like a hard, it was hard to figure out how to get the marketing team on board, because while it is about conspiracy theories, I think the central theme is like, what do you do when you don't share the same beliefs as the adults around you, or like your parents? And that I think is way more universal, whether or not you have conspiracy theories or not. Like that feels like a much more familiar aspect, but it was really difficult to get people to see, like they couldn't imagine who the reader was. Like the voice was kind of young, but the subject matter was harder. So how about you? What do you notice with your?
Yeah, no, I mean, what you said is so true, because when you're writing a book, you don't have to think so much about audience. Like that's not really the point of it. But then when you're trying to sell a book to a publisher, that's a totally different part of the process, and that they really want to know who the reader is. They want to believe that and sometimes if they think there's going to be a substantial readership for a book, like that can be even more appealing to a publisher than thinking this is something that's really well written, or saying something really important, of just being like, oh man, like, we know there's a massive audience for whatever it is, for, and that's how you get books out there that are like the unauthorized biography of Taylor Swift. Like, nobody thinks that's great literature, but they think there are a lot of buyers for it.
Yeah.
Would your editor then help you position your book into the age group in which they thought it should go?
Yeah, so usually you're represented most of the time when you're selling books to publishers, you're represented by a literary agent who they are the sort of the go-between between the author and the publisher, and their job is to try and sell your manuscript to a publisher or an editor at a publishing house who will publish it. And in exchange for doing so, the literary agent gets 15% of any money that you make. And if they don't succeed in selling it, then they don't get any money. So they're sort of, they take you on as a client because they believe that they'll be able to sell your book to a publisher. And yeah, a big part of the agent's job is helping to figure out, when they're pitching it to editors at publishing houses, they're thinking about, how do I position this in a way where the editor will understand who the reader is, what the market is, like where this is going to go in a bookstore.
Oh, I'm going to say what the question was in case people at home couldn't hear. Are most of the big publishers in like New York and big cities, not as much in Austin?
I would say most.
Yeah.
Big, like most, if you think of, like if you have a publisher you know the name of, right? Most of those I think have like a New York based office, but there's a lot more regional publishers. And that's part of like the process of selling, right? Is generally larger publishers have more budgets, right? So that they can pay you more, they can have more marketing outreach. And so part of when my agent goes to sell things is they start with the first list. She's like, okay, I know these editors at these publishing houses who I think would like this. And you ask those people first, and then they say yes or no. And then you go to your next round of people, and then they say yes or no. And then there's a dance of sometimes, like, so for example, for my first book, Puppy Sharma's Guide to Going Home, we had a publisher, an editor reach out and say, like, we want it, but only if you make the main character white. And,
Really?
and yeah, because I'm white, right? So there is like at the time, like, I don't know if you should, I'm gonna put him on the spot. There's my husband in the background. Also, it like grew up in foster care, which is like partly where the story came from. And I had reasons about like, if it was a white main character and she was only working with foster kids of color, then we kind of have this weird savior narrative. And so I knew why I had done it. And so then my agent and I had to have a conversation, like, are you willing to do that to sell it to this editor? And I'd actually started like a first chapter. I just like changed her name and was like Annabelle, and like was playing with it when we got the offer for this one, and then I didn't have to make that.
Oh, good.
Was that because they thought you might not understand a character being a color?
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely. It's a valid concern, and it was really talked about right when I was publishing this. So in like 2019 was when we were selling it, as there was a lot of conversation of, can you do that authentically? Should it be me, right? Like if we're going to have a South Asian character, should it be from a South Asian author? Like what's the benefit? What's the danger of me being the face of this book? And so all really great and valid questions, but that is part of the relationship that comes up is, does the editor like your book? How much do they want you to change your book? How willing are you to make those
Right.
changes?
Is their vision the same as your
Mhm,
vision?
mhm.
And that's, like, as I said, I'm both an author and I'm an editor. And as an editor, there have certainly been times where I've gotten a manuscript on submission and maybe I see the value in it, but I don't have an editorial vision for it. And so I'm like, I'm not gonna acquire it. I'm not gonna publish it because I don't really know what to do with it.
I want to hear more about that. Craig has his hand raised. I want to see what he has to say as well. So Craig, did you have a question?
Yeah, if it's appropriate, can you say something about how much the support you got from your publisher in the marketing phase afterwards? Just because there's a lot of work goes into a book, getting it accepted, getting it published, working with the editors. I'm just asking about that next phase once you actually have the book in your hand. Any stories about that?
Marketing support varies so widely, and it can certainly be frustrating, and also it can be really unpredictable. Like you sort of don't necessarily know when you sell a book what the marketing support is going to be. When, because often it's 2 years from the time you sell a book to when it comes out.
Yes, I know that's frustrating, but true.
And then so things change there over the course of time. And then also, the department that's acquiring your book, the editorial department, is not the marketing department. They don't control the marketing department's budget. So that's, they have a conversation, but it's ultimately not their say. So you do sometimes get situations where an editor loves a book and invests a lot of time and even money in it, and then the marketing team does not, or vice versa. So I've had some really great experiences. I think This Song Will Save Your Life has been my most successful book. And like, I got to go on book tour for that book. Like I got flown around the country to a bunch of different cities. It was
Wow.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
And that's, that's a sort of expenditure that publishers usually don't. I got to go to, I went to bookseller conferences. I went to festivals. It was great. They ran an ad this was 2013. So people were still reading print magazines. There's some Teen Girl magazine and they ran an advertisement in it. I still have it. It's like across the page from Justin Bieber when he was like young and hot. So, and then I've also had, more commonly, I have books where like best case scenario, the publisher will post something to Instagram on the day my book comes out saying that my book has just come out.
And that's it.
And that's it. Yeah. So it's, and a whole range of things in between. And of course there's marketing levels beyond what I've just described that I have never experienced, but have witnessed for the rare few. But the majority of marketing attention goes to the minority of books.
And that was the hard part. So after this book published in fall of 2019, but my second book came out in July of 2021.
Oh, wow.
And because this book got published in September of 2019, all of my spring book school tours got canceled, right? Because of COVID. And then we weren't, and now going is in person. And then people stopped going to bookstores and they were only buying books online. Well, you're not going to find it. No one was going to know, like, should search Bridget Farr. I've never heard of her before. And let's see if she wrote a book, right? Like you would come across it in a physical store and you wouldn't online. And so some of these great, I mean, there wasn't a ton of marketing, but there was things that had happened, right? Like I had gone to an expo in New York and I was on this panel and we had movie options and like things were starting to happen and then it just fell apart. And so my second book, like barely, like the sale numbers are so low because, right, it came out in July. I did an online thing with book people. No one was in stores, no one was there. And so sometimes even like those best intentions got really difficult, where in some ways actually Flux, because they're a smaller publisher, they still send me to, you know, Texas Library Association. They're still involved in a way at Little Brown. Like my editor has moved on, who was there, the marketing team who was there when I was there have moved on. And so the new people are like, well, we published this book years ago, right? They've already moved on to other things. So they're not involved in my life in the way like Flux still is, because I'm still selling quite a few copies for this small publisher. So it's an interesting.
Yeah, they do. They move on, you know, like, so I worked at Penguin Random House, so I know that just on the Penguin side of things, because we were not fully integrated. These are more inside baseball than you need, whatever. Just on the Penguin side of thing, we published 600 books-ish a year. 3 seasons, spring, summer, fall. So that was like 200 or more books per season. So yes, sort of if a book didn't work within its first 6 months, the marketing publicity team sort of had to move on. And it wasn't just because of the personnel changeovers. It was also just like the new books are constantly coming. And they have to.
And that's part of where my agent was talking, you know, as we were having conversations about if I could sell children's again. She's like, honestly, like your books look like they don't sell well.
Mm.
And it's not necessarily your fault, but that she said she was explaining to her own father that like the books he thinks that he likes have been chosen for him by a marketing team. Because there's so many great books, like you were saying, that are great quality literature that didn't get the money behind them because, you know, maybe the author didn't have a great social media presence, which is a big part right now, like how well you can market yourself and how well you use TikTok and how do you get books into people's hands that sometimes your just book doesn't end up in that space, regardless of how quality it is.
I can give you a success story. My niece, Morgan Ryan, just published A Resistance of Witches about witches helping fight Nazis in World War II. Penguin published it. She got to go to Comic-Con, a number of cities, and she has contracts for the next 2 summers. It's a wonderful book. Morgan Ryan, A Resistance of Witches.
Oh, you must be so proud.
That's amazing.
Yes, it's a wonderful book.
It's a great concept too. I just want to say, like, that's such a like witches fighting Nazis. It's like pitch. That's a great elevator pitch. You know.
Yeah.
The
audiobook's even better.
Oh, okay.
We had a question here.
Oh, I was going to say another, backing this up, but the media publishing or the being on social media. My cousin, she found her all-time favorite book just recently, so much that she was begging me to get it signed at Book People on like Instagram. And she's like, this is the most impactful book I've ever read. And I would have never found out about it if I didn't see this lady on Instagram talking about her books.
Do you remember what the book was? Now I want to.
I
don't know. No, I want to.
You told us a couple weeks ago.
For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh, but it's a
BELL.
BELLE.
different one. It's a new one.
Okay.
BELLE. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. I was just like, oh no, bad news for her. Ernest Hemingway is not going to be able to sign this one. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm so curious, like,
The BELLE.
Great title.
right? It's like a
That's great.
Hemingway spin-off. Right?
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, I've read For Whom the Bell Tolls, the original, but this one's like a lady sets up a help desk for the literal hell.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So it's apparently very good. I haven't read it, but the book that she got was like beautiful, I'll tell you. So even was personally signed to her. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that for a social media thing, and how important that is these days.
But even for something like that, it's like, I wonder how, like she saw it on Instagram, I wonder how much of that was because of stuff the publisher did and how much was
Mhm.
because just like ordinary people found the book and liked it and
Mhm.
posted about it.
Yeah.
I think the author did short stories, and this is like prequel to the short stories.
Mm.
So she got people interested in it, and then she announced, she's publishing a book. So I
Mhm.
don't know if it was published or self-published or whatever, but
Somebody back here.
Oh, yeah. Using TikTok to advertise. Do you guys use TikTok at all?
No, do you?
No, I probably should,
I
but
know I should,
How
but
do
I
you
don't
do,
want to.
what kind of social media do you do? I mean, like,
Okay.
yeah, how do you guys promote your own work, or what kind of social media presence do you have for?
not well-run Instagram. I'm really bad at it. I thought about like if the next time I publish something, like I actually think I need to pay someone to just post
Yeah.
it. So I follow this author, I just saw it, Texas Library Association has a bunch of fantasy coming out,
Mhm.
and she posts multiple times a day.
Oh,
Sometimes it's just her like holding her book in Barnes and Noble and like being emotional that she's a published author. And I'm like, you could do that, Bridget. Like you could go. And I've tried, like I've been
Don't
in book
want
people
to.
like with the book and like, okay, like here I am.
emotional.
And it is not like, it is not compelling art or like nothing good is coming from it. But the nice part is like, it matters. So like people, my sister gets a lot of her book recs from Instagram and from Book Talk. Like people are using it as a way to curate selections in a way like they're not gonna go to someone's, like I still Google like great summer reads and then I like find the list and then I write them down and then I go to the library, like, but that's not what a lot of people are doing. So
Yeah.
Right, especially in this space.
yes,
when you're-
yeah. How about
Yeah.
you, Are you
Oh,
social media?
I like the written word is my thing, right? I'm not trying to do visual, like I'm not trying to do video
Mhm.
content. So I had a good run with Twitter, I'm gonna say.
Okay,
Like
nice.
not to brag, but I was verified on Twitter when that meant something.
Oh,
And I did feel like, I mean, did it sell any books? God knows, but I felt like I could post something and like people might
you actually read it.
see it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean, I don't
cool.
know that they'd read my book, but they might read my tweet. But I left Twitter, maybe a year or so ago. And yeah, my Instagram is mostly just like my friends.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is sort of, I mean, no,
Mhm.
I don't want to create videos and good social media content is like, that is an art form in and
Yeah.
of
Well, I
itself,
mean, I
right?
was gonna say, like, if you follow anybody on Instagram or TikTok who does these videos, who you like, I wonder if you like sent them your book, like if they could do a video
Mhm.
featuring,
Right. I mean, that probably is more
Okay.
yeah,
effective. And the publishers.
because we have a lot of
have-
followers and.
Yeah, I'm not trying to build a TikTok following for myself.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
want to
it's
write
someone else's.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, have an influencer do it, yeah.
oh, I was gonna say, I thought your reading of your first chapter or
Yeah.
your first couple paragraphs was really good. And if you did like a motion text to that on like Instagram or something, that might sell.
Yeah.
So
The
I mean-
problem's getting the following. That's the trick.
true, but to get a following, you need to do something.
I know, I know.
Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about how your literary agent is the one who's helping you find a publisher, but some of us in here, not me yet, but some of us are querying publishers. So
Agents.
how did you find your agent if you're querying publishers?
Yeah, I was in the midst of doing the query process, so I had the big spreadsheet with like 50 people I was working through. And I actually found my agent through something that I don't think exists anymore called Manuscript Wishlist Academy.
Oh,
Manuscript Wishlist, the website still exists.
Okay, yeah, so
Okay.
for a while they did, like you could do mini sessions, so I've always worked with a book coach. They used to be based in Austin, this company called Write by Night, and now they're back in Brooklyn. And so I was used to just like, I've never done writing groups, but always just like kind of one. And so my agent did I'll read 30 pages of your book and give you some feedback. And I actually talked to her in my classroom on a planning period. And then I was teaching middle school English. And I had my call, she gave me feedback. And when she was done, she said, can you just send me the whole thing? Like I'm interested. And so she read the whole thing and probably signed me a week later, but I was doing the
Wow.
traditional, sent out letters. And then strangely, I had queried someone else at her agency.
Hmm.
And so then that person it had been long enough, like generally they say, like, if you don't hear from us in X amount of days, like just move on. So I was in that window, and then she wrote me an email like 2 weeks after I signed with her colleague, being like, hey, I would love to see the full thing. And then I had to write back and be like, I'm so sorry, but I just signed with Melissa.
But that's like proof that it's genuinely good.
Yeah,
Two different
yeah.
people were like, I want it.
How about you? How'd you get your agent? Were you an editor first?
I was
and
an
then you were
editor
agent?
first,
Okay.
so like not a story that is
Uh-huh.
applicable to anybody. Like, I did it through working in book publishing,
You
and
had a shoe in.
I knew a lot of agents was how I did it.
How did you become an editor?
Oh, well, so I always knew that I wanted to work in book publishing. Basically, I love children's books. I always have. And I knew I wanted to work in children's books. And I've been a writer, since I've been a reader. So I wrote the first book that I started querying when I was 11. So by the time I was graduating from college, I had been trying to sell a book for literally half my life with no success. I mean, I'd written a number of books in there. I wasn't querying one book for 11 years, but nonetheless, that sort of made it even more clear to me, like, hey, it's really hard to sell a book. I'd written 6 of them, and nobody has been interested in any of them. So the moral of that story is it's hard to sell a book. So when I was graduating from college, I knew I wanted to work in children's books, and I knew equally well that I did not want to try and make a career as a writer, because I was like, it's taken 11 years with no
success.
so like I see no reason to believe that the success is forthcoming. And so if that's my plan for like paying my bills, it seems like a bad plan. But I was like, okay, but there are other jobs in children's books, like being a writer is not the only way to be in the world of children's books. And so, I was a children's bookseller at Barnes and Noble. I interned at the American Library Association for their young adult library services department, just very, sort of anything that touched kids' books in some way I did. And then ultimately got a job in marketing at Penguin Young Readers Group as a marketing assistant. Did that for a couple years, and through that, met pretty much everybody on the Penguin Children's Book team across all departments, got a better sense of what all the different departments did. And then when there was an opening for an assistant and an editorial assistant, I think my friend, I'd made friends with a girl who was an editorial assistant. She was getting promoted to assistant editor, a different job title. And so she was like, hey, they're going to be replacing me. Like, you should tell my boss that you want the job.
Was this all in New York?
Yes, this was all in New York.
So you lived in New York, obviously.
I
You lived
did,
in
yeah.
New York. But was that where you started from, or how did you end up in New York? Are you from New York?
No, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts
Okay.
originally.
So it's just name crack right away.
Yeah, exactly. I went to college out in Chicago, and that was why I interned at the American Library Association, because that's like, when you look at like what exists, what institutions exist for children's books in Chicago, that's sort of the big one. And they didn't even have an internship program at the time. I truly just like reached out to them cold and was like, I love children's books. I need work experience. There are no publishers in Chicago.
Mhm.
You're a nonprofit involving libraries. Can I work for you for free?
And that got you into New York?
That got me that gig. Then after I graduated, I moved back to Boston. But yeah, I was applying to jobs in New York, sort of with the idea of if anybody wanted to interview me, within 5 hours I could be
You were
there.
Amtrak, you were back.
I was
yeah.
ready, yeah. And I could crash on somebody's couch.
Right.
if the need arose, yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Oh, Sherry.
My question is totally different vein. Have either of you experienced any issues with censorship? And do you sell to schools, or I know you said you sold to libraries. Have you dealt in any way with censorship?
I'm going to repeat the question. Sherry's asking if they have dealt at all with censorship, especially working with kids' books. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't yet.
The truth about everything sounds like there are people who would say, I don't want my kid reading that.
Potentially, I interestingly was when I was talking about my second book about the student breaking a dress code. I was at a teacher library event, and one of the librarians was like, I don't think my principal is going to allow me to have this book in the library. And I laughed because I was a principal at the time. I was an assistant principal at the time, and I was actually in my office at work. And I was like, well, I'm an assistant principal and I would let it in your classroom. I think in general with most censorship, that if you have conversations with families about their concerns, that kind of allay them. And frankly, I'm not famous enough for people to put my books on a list. Yep. Right? Like that, there is like language in my dress code book about intersectionality, which is something that like when people talk about critical race theory, like I actually have the name of the professor who did that work in the book, but most people actually don't know what CRT is. They don't know who the person is. So it's not going to show up on anything but questions about like, what does it mean to speak up for others? How does your disability and your race intersect? Like all of that is what critical race theory is. And it's in a middle grade book, but it hasn't gotten attention because again, it didn't really sell very well. So
I feel like if you look at a list of like most banned books, it would be pretty much the same as like most best-selling books.
Yeah.
You know, like when they banned Harry Potter for being like devil worship or whatever,
Sales
witchcraft.
got it.
Yeah, and I well, no, just that it was already, I was like, the only reason why you're banning this is because it's already so popular.
Mhm.
Like, I can't tell you how many kids' books have some sort of witchcraft in them.
Right,
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, yeah, they're only going after, they're only going after books people have heard of.
right, so they're kind of copy and pasted. You take it from place to place. So but that is where I'm really grateful for librarians. Like part of the reason why I'm a writer is because I had an amazing librarian. But just today my school's having a book fair and a student was telling our librarian that he really wanted to buy The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, party pooper, but that his mother didn't like it. She thought the kid was not a well-behaved child. And so he was going to secretly buy it. And not tell her.
Yeah.
And my librarian, I was overhearing, had the best conversation about how like we don't want to keep books secret, but she'd be happy to talk to his mom about her concerns for the book and like that kind of like hands-on real life. And so the more often I would love for people just to come in and talk about the book, right? Like, what are you concerned about? Let's talk about what age appropriate is. Like as a,
How does that affect your books? Like when you have a book fair at the school, because of all the fans books at school, do they have to screen before they go on?
good question. New books that are ordered do. So like if my librarian is going to order any new books in Texas, they have to be approved.
Is that because of SB 13?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so, right, so that's a new
Uh-huh.
law, like as of this school year.
Mhm.
SB 13.
Uh-huh. Whereas for the book fair, because I don't know actually for sure, but I think Scholastic must have they have a curated list that they must have gotten that approved already because we didn't have to go through the separate school board vote to have them there. But it is why like we don't accept donations. Like there's a whole process for donations for books because people think, well, this is great. We should just take whatever. But then if someone actually did write a book about, I don't know, something inappropriate for elementary school kids, we also want to not be able to have it. So that's where I just really lean on librarians. Like that is her job. Her job is to curate books. Like she wants the best books in kids' hands. And so it is limited right now, like what books we can buy, which is tricky.
When it comes to protecting children, when I was 8 years old, I'm a baby boomer, I was washing dishes, listening to the Cuban Missile Crisis, scared, along with my mother. And we were duck and cover girls, and boys. We would go and put our hands over our heads in the hallway. We knew that we were toast. But that's why we learned to laugh at the bomb finally. But I think it's okay for kids to learn about the whole McGill myself.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's sad that you said that they're not allowed to accept donations.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Well, they just have to be vetted, right? So they have to go through the librarian and now the librarian has to go through a longer process. So yeah, it's complicated. More time consuming. Mostly content, the same way the librarian normally would. Like we don't have like adult romance in the elementary school library. So if someone donated it, she has like a rubric where she's gonna go through it. Yeah, no, like a book donation.
I love doing school visits and I'm having a harder and harder time doing school visits. And I just did Giddings, but it was a vetting process.
Yeah.
You know, it was a 6-month vetting process for me to get into the Giddings school. And I certainly appreciate them and the school loved my presentation. But but it's hard to get presentations in
It
schools.
is. Well, and now I just got an email on this on Friday that says that authors can only get approved if they don't charge a fee.
Well, I don't.
So they don't-
I don't
right.
charge.
Right, but again, for authors, right, if you don't make a lot for your book and you're trying to travel to a state, like it's expensive, right? To
Right.
come, if you don't live in Austin to do a visit, and so it makes it harder for schools to get people to come because it's not reasonable to ask someone to do
Why
their
can't
work.
you charge a fee?
It then gets them into a different vetting process.
Got it. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, I'm an amateur and I love kids, so, I just
Yeah.
talking before kids,
Yeah, it does
that's as exciting as selling a book.
We have a question right here.
Justin, yeah, Justin and then Craig. Justin, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say something similar to what Catherine said about, people of my generation and younger than my generation is we've lived our whole lives through the threat of school shootings and other types of things. And our response to that was humor. So like a lot of times whenever I hear people talk about, oh, the kids, we need to protect the kids from violence and all this stuff, it's like, well, that's kind of what we already see a lot of the time and we hear a lot of it, and it's not great, but we make jokes, we laugh, and we try to ignore the scariness of it. So really, it's good to, not put stuff in front of kids that might totally upset them, but like getting riskier is not the same as traumatizing every kid ever, because well, we already are kind of traumatized.
Hmm.
And we traumatize ourselves. I'll say that too. So just that's part of the reason why I'm not great on censorship, because I've lived through the stuff that people want to censor, and it's real. So anyway, I didn't want to make that super dark.
No,
but
it's a good point.
It's important.
I mean, you're right. I did not have to have experiences with active shooters in schools, and luckily my children didn't either, but it does seem odd, right, to censor what kids are reading when they're living, this
Yes.
very real threat.
That reminds me, did any of you see Saturday Night Live? One of my favorite humans in the world, Pete Davidson.
Yes.
When he said, I wouldn't be famous except my dad was killed. And I was, I can't believe he said that. But he has to laugh at it. He's looking at it.
That was definitely unscripted.
Yeah. All right, Craig has his hand raised.
He didn't read the
His
teleprompter.
band's still up.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, so a non-traumatic question, I think. Just vocabulary and jargon. So what, you said what a young adult and what a school was. What formally is a children's book? Is that less than 8? If you want to put a number to it, or how is that defined?
It's the whole dang thing. Children's books are 0 through 18. So the
Oh,
category
interesting. Okay, thank you. I'm glad I asked it.
encompassed in children's book break down roughly to, and you actually, I'm going to tell you what they are, but you actually could figure this out by going to Book People or any other bookstore and seeing how they categorize their books there, because the categories that publishers use are pretty much the same as the categories that bookstores use, because they're giving them a category to tell them where in the bookstore to put it. So children's books include board books, which are the like 0 to 3-year-olds, the like sturdy cardboard where mostly your child is going to chew on them. Then picture books, which is sort of like 4 to 8-year-olds. Those are the ones where they're illustrated 4-color throughout. There's a beautiful one over there.
Kirti's book.
Yay. Then chapter books, which is sort of like 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And those are also going to be illustrated throughout, but they're going to have more the shape of a novel. They're going to be longer than a picture book, for emerging readers mostly, then middle grade, which we talked about, then young adult. And then also there are graphic novels in there, which you recognize just because and you can do graphic novels at any one of those age groups, except probably not board books. I've never seen a
I've
graphic
never seen
novel
a graphic
board
novel.
book. Sounds complicated.
Because they're almost the same thing.
Rob and I have worked on a graphics novel book, and we've had trouble thinking of what the age is for it. Sort of my text and his illustrations. We're still kind of wrestling with that. The other thing I was going to ask is I mean, really, it was for all ages, it turned out. But formally, how do you classify Harry Potter?
Oh,
How does one, not you personally, but
it's in the J chapter books here, so it's like middle grade. So,
Middle grade
I would
formal.
count middle grade, yeah.
Mm. It's
Personally,
tricky because the film versions, I think, changed, right? Like if it's thinking of like schools, like the first book, the movie and the later one,
yeah.
like I think it made a young adult switch in tone and
yeah.
material.
Book too,
Whereas
yeah.
the
Because they
books
grew up,
do,
they got
but
older.
right, but they don't.
Got a little darker and more serious. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guarantee you, adults enjoyed them as well. We read them all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I personally argue that the last couple books were definitely more into YA, just for the amount of people who die. Like,
Yeah.
well, actually, I'm not gonna say who dies because there might be.
No, don't spoil
Right.
it. Spoilers.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, yeah. But, we have several people. Just, you guys just fight over it. Go ahead. That's fine.
The publisher is concerned not just about the age range of the potential audience, but whether more girls or boys might be interested in the text.
Yeah.
You can probably speak to that better than me.
Yeah, I mean, publishers are thinking about audience in all regards, right? Because they want to make sure that there are going to be buyers for this book. So they're fine to do a book that is going to appeal primarily to girls or primarily to boys, but they're certainly thinking about that. And when they're thinking about their list overall, you know, they're looking at, do we have a good balance of books for all different types of kids, or at least all the different types of
Is
kids
it a
we're trying to.
stereotypical idea, or do they actually have data? Like, we know more boys like dinosaurs than.
I would say it's more anecdotal, actually. So I hard data, probably not, but it's more from like, you know, when they look at who attends authors' visits and what sort of fan mail they're receiving for authors.
Well, and that's the surprising and sort of tricky part of middle grade is that they are not buying books themselves, right? Like they are all books
Yeah.
that you have to sell to adults to sell to children. So you're kind of doing double marketing because you're like, what will this adult think that this child will want? Whereas when you're a teenager, you can use your own money and buy a book, and adults are making
Yeah.
their own purchases. But like if a school library purchases a book or if a bookstore does, like they are thinking that an adult is going to pick that book for their kid. So it's an interesting double layer of marketing.
Yeah.
Do you think they did it right? The adults, like, thinking it'd be liked by the child.
Do you think that, I'm gonna repeat it, do you think that adults get it right when they're marketing books for kids, buying books for kids? Do you think they're getting books that kids actually enjoy?
Often.
I think so. The piece that I find missing in schools, and I keep being like, you should write it, but I haven't done it, is like high interest, low Lexile. There's like certain publishers have a set of these, but like for example, so my school has a lot of new immigrants to the country, has a lot of students who are learning English as a second language, and students who are just experiencing poverty, so have some struggles with text. And we had classroom libraries full of books for children who at a different time maybe could read at that level, but especially post-COVID, like kids' reading levels as a whole are down. And it's very difficult to find books that feel like a middle grade. It's about a middle schooler, they're going through these harder things, but that is easier to read. And so because a lot of times I found it with myself, like as an author, I liked reading. So I wrote a book at the level that I could write, like with a higher Lexile, with the vocabulary that's different. And that's something that's really difficult to source. Especially, that's why I love graphic novels, but sometimes teachers are resistant, but like it actually is really helpful because I can get a student who looks at a big book and is like, absolutely not, I'm not reading all of this,
Right.
to try something. But that is a hole in the piece where
Yeah. High low.
high lows, they're called. So high Lexile or high interest, low Lexile. So like the reading level of it, of the book.
And there's also kind of the problem that sometimes people have where a kid might be a really amazing reader. So they go over to YA to get something that's more challenging.
And
But
the topics are.
maybe the topics, the
Uh-huh,
content is
uh-huh.
like not what they're ready for yet too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right, which was more my experience as a kid.
Both of those problems in my own classroom,
Mhm.
being a fourth grade teacher.
Yeah.
I have students that will gravitate more to the graphic novels if they're a struggling reader, and they just like, will plow through those Dog Man,
Yeah.
and Captain Underpants books because they're easier reads.
Mhm.
And then I have parents, of my students that are really great readers, and they're like, what else can my kid read? They just devour these books, and I don't know if these next books are age appropriate for
Right.
them. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Like, for kids that read well, have age appropriate material.
And you can have, right, like, lists and guides and for this sort of thing, and those do exist. But it's like, again, if you're going into a bookstore or you're going into a library, there are a finite number of categories. Like you might pull out a display of like, here are middle grade books that are great for younger kids with higher reading levels, but you're not gonna create a whole permanent shelf that's just for those. You have your middle grade shelves and
Both of these libraries are amazing.
yes.
I did when I was picking out a lot of books for my person. I would always ask them,
Yeah.
because that age level of reading, and one more thing. I think our schools do an amazing job. Our schools, I don't know about other schools, but they had him, he's now in the 9th grade, but he was 8th grade last year. They had him reading things that I had read as an adult. And they were, sometimes I thought, pretty challenging topics. Lord of the Flies, the, one about I forgot the name of it, about the boys in the hood.
The Outsiders.
The Outsiders.
Mm.
And these were challenging books. I read them too, and I had already read Lord of the Flies, but I had not read The Outsiders. And I read them when they were assigned, and not to censor, because I don't. But I wanted to know. And I was so pleased that they were sending out things that these were adult topics
Challenging book.
that kids needed at the age of 13 and 14.
Can I ask about writing? You mentioned it, Richard, about writing cross-ethnic. My latest book, my second book, the final chapters are dealing, it's set in the 19th century and it's dealing with an escaped slave. And I have struggled with his language. And I started off, I thought, too easy. It sounded too educated. And so then I took the book James, which is out right now, and I used that as a dictionary. So I went through James and I created a dictionary of slave language. Because if you just Google, Black dialect, you get modern day, and that wasn't what I needed. So then I probably went too far the other way. And so then I thought, okay, that's, I'm not trying to be condescending. So I scaled it back a little bit. Well, I just got my book back from my editor and she wants me to scale it back a little bit more. Because I'm not Black and I wasn't ever a slave. So, and I had none in my family.
She
So
thinks that will impact its ability.
I don't
to
know.
market it.
I don't know why. I'm not sure. I haven't read all her notes. But I'm thinking I understand it's hard for someone who is white to write about, I don't know what the ethnicity is of your character there, but you have an American Indian in there, but he doesn't have a dialect. So, but he's American Indian. So how do you handle dialect? Because a slave would not talk like the other white characters in the book would speak.
Well, I can't speak specifically to dialect. I think the big questions are why, right? Like, is this critical to the story? Is it critical for you to write that character into the story? And then get readers. Like for all of my books, I've had several readers from that same background to say, like, look and see what things I didn't see. Because that happens regardless. I mean, race aside, like if you have a character with a disability, like there's a way of, if you're wanting to write a broad world, you want to be thoughtful about, especially I think if you're writing for children, then the stakes are higher, right?
Well, it's YA.
Right, but so they're also children, right? Like they're
Right,
just
yeah.
slightly larger children, but the responsibility of writing something, because it's their entry points into seeing the world. I think of that, like I grew up in very rural Montana, like books are how I have a sense of people who look different than me, who sound different than me. So I think it would be taking those steps, like read what your editor's notes are. Like there are a lot of people whose entire job is to do this, who say, I will read your manuscript and give feedback on these pieces, or looking for the community to see what you're getting right, what questions might be there, and lean into the hard parts, right? Like I love my agent because she is She does not sugarcoat anything. There is no fluffiness. She asks
Right.
very hard questions and she will push me very hard. So when something does come out, I feel like, okay, I can stand behind criticism. I know why I did it. I have vetted it. I've really thought about it. I asked all of these people. My agent asked me really difficult questions, and I am confident that it is the only way to tell this story. But sometimes it's right. You might even have to ask yourself, like, is this character actually needed?
Well, the
Is there
character's
another way?
critical.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's critical to the story, but
Uh-huh.
but I want dialect. I don't want them to sound white.
Mhm.
He wasn't, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still struggling with how to handle the issue of dialect so the reader knows, oh, this is well, he's escaped, but a former enslaved person
Mhm.
who is very smart. He's
Mhm.
smarter than the white guy,
Mhm.
but he doesn't have the education.
Mhm.
So he obviously has a dialect. So how do I,
Yeah.
I'm.
Lots of refinement sounds
It's
like.
a refinement, it's a refinement. I realize that. Okay.
Yeah, I think Justin, did you have something that you were gonna?
Oh, I can't remember it
Okay,
now.
okay,
It was,
okay.
Sorry.
it's okay.
I've just been dying to talk to Bridget about her book because I really loved your Truth About Everything book. And the whole time I was like, you share, you're from rural Montana, but how did you think about this story and how did this story and this particular girl and character and situation come about in your brain and your mind and things
Yeah.
like that?
Great question. I actually got the idea for it in a legal issues in schools class. So I was in school to be a principal, and we were talking about students' legal rights to an education. And I asked, like, what do you have any, right? If you are 16 and you're like, I want to go to Catholic school, or I don't want to be homeschooled, like, do you have any legal right to that? And they don't, children don't, right? So as someone who cares so deeply about education, it was a fun thought experiment, right? But like horrifying to think that you actually would have no control over that until you're 18, unless you can emancipate, but you have to have financial independence to do so. Your parents can decide whatever it is that they want you to learn.
But aren't parents like legally obligated to send you to school?
They are-ish. So like, in most states, like including in Texas, like they don't have the government power to come check what you're learning. So families can say, and this is true in Montana. So I called a social worker in my hometown and was like, what? She's like, oh, this happens all the time, right? Parents are like, I'm homeschooling, and then they're not actually learning anything, but there's no one to come look at what you're doing. You don't have to get your curriculum approved. You're supposed to, like there's statutes. And Tara Westover wrote Educated, which you haven't read, which actually I read after I started this. So timing wise, they were kind of overlapped. And then honestly, personally at the time I was going through the process, I think many Americans were, about like, my dad and I didn't share political beliefs, and things that we used to be aligned on, suddenly we weren't anymore. And the pain in thinking like, I have this really loving relationship with this person, but there's this piece that I don't understand. Like, how did you get here? And rural Montana is, I think, interesting in the sense that if you kind of follow blanking, like the incident in Waco and then Ruby Ridge and kind of that rise that was happening in the 90s. There's actually a town outside of where I grew up in Montana that's in the book where there was an 81-day standoff with the FBI with these anti-government sovereign citizens, but people don't really know about it because only one person died, and it was like in a car accident dealing with the issue. And how easy, like no one ever talked about that. Like we drove past it all of the time. There was just this culture and history that people can ignore. And so, yeah, really wanting to think about that question of what would you do if you didn't actually have control over your education, combined with the really, in some ways, scary and sad feeling of thinking, what if I don't believe what my parents believe, right? And how can I stay with them? Like, what does that relationship look like? Which again, like I found difficult as an adult, I still think is difficult, but is even harder when you're at an age where what if you don't have a choice to leave it? Or if you do make that choice, what are you giving up? Because I think that's the difference with Tara Westover's book, is there's a lot of physical abuse and violence in the story, which is her life. But I wanted you to see her love her parents, because it's a lot harder in some sense when someone is caring for you the best of their ability and you can see that and it not be enough.
Yeah, I love both your books.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I cannot, put the truth about it, everyone down. Like, I love how you started every chapter with a couple of different kids. We didn't know what was happening, or what was happening, and what was happening. And, I was reading Bobby Sharma with my son,
Okay.
and I was so scared that there would be something similar to the book. I was trying to read ahead. But we really enjoyed it, and I love how you made, the mom try to learn about it.
Yeah.
You didn't like try to push that
Mhm.
aside, you addressed that, so.
Yeah.
that was-
Yeah, thank you. If you haven't read it yet, like it's tricky when you're gonna write a book about foster care, right? Because you're gonna have to have something hard that got a child into foster care. And interestingly, we don't actually hear much about what happened with her mom. Partly because I learned over the years, with my own partner, that you're not entitled to someone's story, right? And I definitely didn't think that, right? I thought if someone had something hard in their life and you care about them, like they should tell you and you should get to know the details, right? And I wanted kids to see that like someone can love you and care for you and never need to know the details of what happened. But I then also had to have this kind of scary thing. So interestingly, it's like another foster family where she has her traumatic moment and you don't actually ever see that from the part with her mom.
I also love that, well, in both your stories, the characters are like so strong. They've been through so much, but still they're like strong people and they're not like shy. And they're trying to.
Thank you.
Usually it's like, oh, they have a bad past, so they're like very scared, like, you know, but then, yeah, this would be great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that also what you're talking about points to one of the like interesting challenges of writing middle grade, that there's sort of, there's no topic that's off,
Mhm.
That's out of bounds for middle grade. Like you can write about kids whose parents have been through or have done really horrific things that those kids may be the victims of. And so thinking about like, how do I write this in a way that is truthful and like representing the real lived experiences of some kids, without, traumatizing kids who who are unaware of the fact that parents could do these sorts of things.
Did you find one of your books that you had to wrestle with that the most?
It's a good question. I don't know that it's honestly, my characters don't have so much like, I'm gonna say backstory trauma. There is in this Song Will Save Your Life, maybe this is like the closest answer where you're thinking about. There's a suicide attempt near the start of this Song Will Save Your Life, and that's sort of the catalyst that puts the rest of the book in motion. And so yeah, so the question of like how graphic and on the page do you get with that, and sort of like how much detail do you need? When do you fade to black? And actually the UK publisher was more conservative on that than the US publisher was. And so the UK version of that scene is a bit, tamer. But also it's like I wasn't trying to go into much like with what you're talking about with your character in foster care, where it's like the point of this story is not to like stun you with how terrible life can be. It's like the story's about what happens after, and like the, how somebody who's been through something difficult then goes on to live the rest of their life in the face of that. And so yeah, I'm not just trying to like shock somebody.
There are cults that, such as Scientology and Jehovah's Witness, that have a lot of child abuse. And some of it's actually ingrained in their scripture, especially Scientology. Do you know of anybody who's written about that from a child's point of view?
There are a lot of cult middle grade and YA novels out there. It's a really popular topic. Sorry, I think
Do
there's.
you find it appropriate and maybe helpful to inject some humor occasionally to kind of just break the tension?
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think human beings like it, right? Like we need it naturally. And it's fun I think that's the fun part of having other people read your book or reading your book out loud because you write it by yourself, right? And so like you're writing something you think is funny. But it's then you don't always know, or sometimes I've written things that I actually didn't in my head think like, oh, people will laugh at this. But then when you read it out loud, you're like, oh yeah, that was funny, right? So I think it's figuring out where the lightness is. And part of stuff is funny just by the situational, right? Like there's, and probably remember her foster brother, who's probably one of my favorite characters I've ever written, at one point is like carrying a tuba and it's like clunking on the ground, because I also do theater, and like it's just a funny thing, right? Like it's not necessarily a joke, but just like life is funny sometimes as you're the proportion and play with those pieces of the story.
Totally.
Yeah.
You guys talk about your writing process, like how long does it take? Get up in the morning, set aside 2 hours, for an outline, talk to the editor, how do you come up with ideas? Say, oh, well, this is the one, right, set that aside, or you just keep hammering on to say, I can just.
The question is about the writing process. Yeah.
You want to go first, Violet? Right.
Yeah, though I feel like I'm not wedded to like a particular process. So it's funny when you say like, do you just keep hammering away at it? One of the like annoying things about writing, I think, is like sometimes the answer is just keep hammering away at it, and sometimes the answer is like walk away for a while, and it's really hard to know which is which. And when you're like, like when you're like, sort of banging and banging and banging at the door trying to figure it out, and you're like, is this progress that I just like, is the constant thinking about this and trying things, is that getting me closer to my goal? Or like, should I go for a walk? And I am very bad at telling. But it's, it's like when you're like, I think like many writers, I find the middle to be challenging, right? So like coming up with a premise that I'm excited about is fairly, it's the hard part. Coming up with a premise that I'm excited about is probably the easiest part. It's like you have this, spurt of adrenaline. You're like, oh, like anything's possible. You're meeting this character, you're getting to know everything about them. You're not, but then eventually you've written enough that you're sort of boxed in, and you've created problems for your character, which hopefully are not easily solved. If they were easily solved, you wouldn't have much of a plot. They could just go solve them. So then invariably with all my books, I get to a stage where I'm like, well, I don't know what a solution looks like. Like if the solution were obvious, they would have done it already. And so even where I know roughly what the happy ending is always going to look like. And I do, because I write children's and YA, like there is always a happy ending. It's not always everything is perfect. Like in Museum of Lost and Found, for example, the ending is not that she and Bailey become best friends again, and that she gets to keep this like really cool museum clubhouse that she's discovered and gets to keep, using it for as long as she wants. Neither of those things are the case. But there is an ending that feels hopeful and positive, and like she's leaving the book in a better place than where she started, which is really, that's what I want. But so the question of sort of like, okay, if you can't like you need to get there, and how do you get from here to there, and what are the things that she tries, and how do those things go for her? And that can be the very hard part. And so that's the bit where I usually find myself being like, do I keep beating against this wall, or eventually will something just kind of come to me if I let it be?
As far as logistics, I had a professor in college, a writing professor, say, writing is easy, thinking is hard.
Yeah.
So I have given myself that, like, anytime I'm thinking about my book counts. I am not a write everyday person. And I also don't write in chronological order, which I did not realize was not that common. But for my book coach, I'm the only person of his who doesn't. And the problem is I create myself a lot of problems because I will have written things and by inspiration. And for me, it's really strange. I have to hear the first sentence of the section I'm going to read before I can start writing it. So there's a lot of like walking around thinking, and then I'll get the idea. And then later I'll be like, oh no, I'll find it. It's like archaeology, like, oh, I forgot I wrote that she had a brother. Why did I forget she has a brother? I have to go back and look often, like, who's this person? And then I have to like get rid of that person. And then I have to like go back and find like where all did they put. Sometimes I set myself a 10-minute timer because you can do anything for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then usually I'll like push it again, I'll push it again, I'll push it again. Because for me, like I found that if I haven't thought about it enough and the story isn't in my head, at least the start of it, it's wasted time. Like if I sit at my computer, sometimes I'll reread stuff and I'm like, okay, that counts as time. But I don't have the to write core drafts in some ways. Like I want to write something that's higher quality off the bat. And so it's better for me to just take the time and think about it. And I have to fight through the middle stage where it sounds like I wrote it, which then gives me like this anxiety of like, it doesn't sound like a real book. And I'll send pages to my book coach and I'm like, I'm in the stage. He's like, well, you don't think it sounds like a real book? And I'm like, yeah, because it sounds like me, right? Like in my head, like authors are other people. And so I have to, it's fun. Like recently I went back and read something on a similar project for a while. I even like printed it for my husband, was like, will you read this page? Cause like, it sounds like a real book. And my agent won't let me write something that isn't good, right? Like he financially is invested, but also like personally is invested in it being good. And so,
Yeah, I really like that line though of like, writing is easy, thinking is hard. I think that's so true, where it's like, you know, like writing 1,000 words in a day is easy if you know what's gonna happen in those 1,000 words.
right.
Can I ask a small question about just how to get into the industry? Like, I'm looking to become a writer as a profession, and I'm very young. I don't have a whole lot of experience under my belt. Like, what's a good way to start? Like, you have any advice on like where to go for like, should I self-publish stuff and submit stuff into to like magazines? Should I just submit, or is there like other?
What category are you trying to write in?
Oh, well, this might be the issue, but I'm adult novels, not adult novels, but like just
That kind of adult.
Not for kids.
I mean, I think one day I'd like to write some YA, just because I read so much of that when I was younger. So I mean, if you all want to tell me how to get started in YA, I'd love to hear that too.
Just because there are so many different ways in, there's not just one path.
Mhm.
And also I think some ways work better for some categories than others, right? Like if you were trying to write romance, I think there's a really well-trod path of like indie pub or fanfic to traditional publishing in romance. If you're trying to write literary fiction, I think like selling short stories to prestigious literary journals remains a really good way of finding an agent in that path. So
and the small piece, which is not as technical, but like you also have to just really like writing on its own, right? Like, because you're going to spend a lot of time. Like I also have several books that I wrote for years that didn't go anywhere. And even now where that's changed some, right? Like I have a couple of projects, my agent was like, I can't sell these. And so they're in my computer, and my book coach is like, aren't we going to come back to that? And I'm like, not right now, because I'm not interested in writing things that aren't published, but I did for a long, long time. And so like finding what you like about writing, because if you don't love the process, it's going to be, if you're just waiting to be published, like there's going to be so much of your life that's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
Because publishing is short, right? Like even between books, it's 3 years, it's 5 years. There's a lot of time where you're going to be doing the craft by yourself.
I mean, I spend most of my time thinking of stories.
Okay,
so
well, that's a good start.
I just need to get good at the writing portion of that.
And it's true, like you, like I still write books that don't sell. It's not like once you've sold your first book, then they're like, great, we want to publish everything you ever write. Unfortunately, like I think if you're J.K. Rowling, it's like that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Or
maybe
James
not
Patterson.
more.
yeah, sure.
There were two different questions. What were the questions? How long does it take to write a book for you all? And how long does it take?
Mine is usually is almost consistently 2.
years.
But I'm working on a project right now that I realized I was coming up on 3 years and I was like, whoa, I'm like out of sync, but I'm hoping, because I'm doing a lot of revisions with my agent. So my hope is we can sell in the spring, but we'll see.
I also feel like it sort of depends, like, what do you count as working on it, right? So I have a book where I had the idea pre-pandemic and currently have like 70 pages written.
Mhm.
Am I working on that? I mean, you know, in practice, no, but like in my mind, yes. Or then like I have a book coming out next fall. I sold it like on proposal earlier this year. Like basically I said, here's the idea and an outline of what I think is going to happen. I sold it and I wrote the entire first draft of that in 3 months because that was the timeline the publisher wanted to be on.
Wow.
That's not my preferred way to work, but you know, but if a publisher is like, hey, we want to do this, and the only way we're going to do it is if you write this book in 3 months, then like, if you would like to have that book come out, you say yes.
That's good motivation. Yeah.
I remember
If you
that-
can find a writing workshop, my sister Patricia Ryan wrote a whole bunch of mystery stories. And she ran a writer's workshop and she wrote the book, How to Write the Novel You Can't Put Down.
Useful.
She wrote the Nell Sweeney series of mysteries. And she found that it was helpful to be around other writers to get feedback.
Here we are.
Yeah, so
Here we are.
Presentation a couple of years ago now, and I found that so intriguing that you think about, you know, what's trending and you think about what kind of story do I want to write for what's trending, and then you shop it, and then if it sells, you're like, yes, I'm writing that book. I think that's great. I find that so intriguing.
It's, yeah. Yeah, there are so many different ways. As I said, it's like there are so many different ways
Yeah.
to get a book.
There was a question back here.
Yeah, Lauren.
I was just wondering, you know, it sounds like, you know, there needs to be a person that like is consulted, you know, that can lead someone through, like they want to write a book, you know, they go to that person and they tell them, you know, they help them along the way, you know, through publishing, through marketing. Is that what a book consultant does? Or
Right. Is that like the you said you had a
Yeah, I'm a
coach?
book coach, but that not really. My book coach is more of just like an editor I pay. Partly for accountability, because it's like a gym, right? Like,
Yeah.
I could go to the park and exercise, but I don't because I don't pay them anything. No, I don't know. I mean, maybe there are people who kind of do that process of kind of walking you through it. Most of it for me was just, is finding online resources, right? Like people were talking, there's a lot of authors who've been really great about sharing. Here's how you query, here's how you X, here's this part. And then once you have an agent, like she meets with the editor and they talked, you know, she reviewed the marketing package that they gave to me. And I had to ask her, like, is this good? Is this not? Because I don't have any comparison, but. Mhm.
Yeah, agents are super helpful for that.
Mhm.
But yes, I also feel like you've just come up with like a new, like fourth career for me.
There you go, yeah.
I enjoy being a publishing coach. Man, at Texas Book Festival over the weekend, I met an author. I was talking to her for a while. She has probably 15 books out in a series, and the things she doesn't know, because you know, it's like, you know, your part. It's like she knows how to write a really great book. She knows how to do school visits. You know, but she was like, how does the publisher decide what my advance is? You know, she doesn't know that. She just gets an offer. And I was like, oh, I know that.
That's
Right. I want to tell you. I would like to tell everybody these things.
Yeah.
How does it work? I mean, the agent gets 15% of what you get, but how does the publisher, do they give you like a lump sum? Do they give you 10 grand, 100 grand, or do they give you a percentage of sales? What are some actual numbers? Or
Yes.
is it worth it all?
No, it's financially, it's not worth it. If the
Really have to love.
yeah, if your motivation is the money, unfortunately, like the dollars per hour that you're going to be making is essentially never going to be worth it.
If that's the case, it's just kind of like, why, it's almost like, why even listen to the publisher or anybody? Just like write what you want, your heart, and just self-publish it.
Sure. Well, I guess it depends how much. Sure. And then it depends how much distribution you're hoping for, right? How wide an audience are you hoping to reach? And I, these are all very complicated, big questions, and I think we
I
have
know,
like
almost out of time.
2 minutes
Yeah,
left.
Yeah.
But yeah, the basics of the finances break down that if your agent sells your book to a publisher, you get an advance against royalties. You get to keep your advance basically no matter what, like unless you default on the contract and don't deliver the book or something. Like the advance is yours, even if they wind up selling 5 copies, you still get to keep the advance. The advance is paid out to you in installments. If it's depending on the publisher and how much money it is, often it's going to be half of the advance on signing of the contract, and half of the advance when you deliver the final manuscript. Sometimes they'll break it up even further: third on signing, third on delivery, third on publication, maybe even into quarters if it's a lot of money and the publisher is really trying not to pay you much per year. So that winds up then being so like in advance can be those numbers you said. The answer is yes. Like I've seen advances.
6:30, the library will close in 30 minutes. Computers will automatically shut down 5 minutes before 7 o'clock.
I've seen advances that are $1,000. I've seen advances that are 10,000. I've seen advances that are 100,000, and very rarely I have seen the occasional advance that's $1 million. Like, and everything in between, right? But but if you think so, like, let's say you're getting 20,000 for a book. Like 20,000 is a good chunk of change. But in practice, the way that this actually goes is, so it's 20,000, first 15% off the top goes to your agent. So that brings you to 18,500, 17,500, somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
17,500. 17,500.
Yeah.
Okay, so 75 still a pretty good chunk of money. Then remember, that's probably going to be divided into minimum 2 payments, and those minimum 2 payments are going to be probably over the course of at least 2 years, right? So you'll probably get one on signing, and then it will likely be a year later that you get the second one. So your $20,000 advance winds up then in practice being like $8,750
Per year.
per year. Which again is like, I'll take it, but would you consider that to be worth it? Then the other major element of the finances are royalties, and that's basically for every copy that's sold, a certain percentage, usually somewhere between like 5 and 15% of the list price of that book goes to the author. But you don't just like get it. Like if they sell 100 copies of the book and you're getting $2 per copy, you're not just like getting $200. That $200 is applied to your advance, and you don't see any more money until you've earned out your advance.
Oh, wow.
So if you got that,
Deductible, like it.
exactly like a deductible. So if you got that $20,000 advance and you're getting $2 for every copy sold, then once the publisher sold 10,000 copies, then you start getting new money. Per copy 10,001, then you get $2. Yeah, exactly.
But your agent still gets 15%.
Yes, so you get $1.75.
Yeah.
Get 50% of the royalty.
They do. They get 15% of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, yeah.
They're just hanging on for the whole.
They are. So agents, as I said, like authors do not pay them. You don't pay an agent to represent you. They only get paid if they sell your book. And they don't get paid by their agency. Like they're employed by an agency, but they only make money from selling your book. So
They're commission only.
they're commission only. So yeah,
And
they
they
are
have
also
to
trying to
eat.
make a living.
Yeah.
They gotta eat. Yeah. And think about how many books they have to sell at $20,000 pop for them to be able to be making a salary each year.
And most agents only have about a dozen clients.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Depends.
Depends on the person, but.
And the publishers must be super sophisticated about their audience coming books. They're just look at the book, look at the audience, and say, I think we're gonna be able to sell 1,000.
This might be why they move on so quickly.
Yeah.
It's constant. And then there's probably some slick maneuver where they put a bunch of books out and one that's really good, and
Subsidized.
That is in fact how it works, yes. We are
I
gonna
know.
be
It's 6:30. Yeah. I know.
selling our books if anybody wants to buy
Yeah,
them and get a
yeah,
copy
yeah.
signed, but also you don't have to. Thank you for coming.
Thank
anyway.
you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And
That was awesome, Maureen.
thank you so much for being here, you guys. We're gonna sign off and we will see you next Monday. Thank you for coming. And Craig, I'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lucky for you.
Bye-bye.
Good problem.